All right, free agency is over. Let's just go ahead and do what y'all want to do. Let's talk about the draft. Looking at picks 33 and 39, what should be the priority for the Carolina Panthers? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because on Fridays throughout the offseason, like today's Friday, I'll be right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. What you got to do is either at me or DM me, and of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. And this is the perfect time, North Carolina, for all the folks out there that have picked up FanDuel and sports betting since it launched on March 11th to go out there and place that $5 bet. A lot of things going on with March Madness. I have already won some money. I've lost some money, having a great time. But let's talk about the Panthers today. And for me, the draft obviously is a fun time of the year. It's never been my personal favorite, but I've come around on the draft, honestly, since when I first started doing the show back in 2021. And for me, I always like to wait till free agency is over before really getting into it, preferably not until the beginning of April. Now, last year, when the Panthers trade up to number 1 on March 10th, we had to start talking draft right then and there. Who'd they trade up for? Was it Bryce Young? Was it CJ Stroud? Anthony Richardson? The draft talk started early. This year, I really needed to see what they were going to do during free agency to figure out who they're going to potentially target as far as player-wise, position-wise. They're at 33 and now at 39 in the second round since the Carolina Panthers traded away Brian Burns to the Giants. And we can't wait till April because free agency, it's basically over. The Panthers, they brought in David Moore. Welcome back to Carolina. Maybe you'll make the team this time as a wide receiver. They brought in Josh Nijman this week. They're just bringing in a bunch of depth guys and still waiting on Jadeveon Clowney. So let's just go ahead and do it. We'll talk draft. I didn't want to empty the clip already. There's still over a month until we get down to Detroit. So I'm going to have to find a way to be creative this year and figure out more things to talk about, not having a first round pick and not only just talk about what to do in the second round. We'll bring some people on the show along the way. But let's just go ahead and do it. I wanted to wait, but I cannot wait because y'all have questions. And let's go ahead and answer them on this weekly Friday mailbag on Locked On Panthers. Starting off with Brian, who asked, with the 2 picks at 33 and 39, do you think it would be smart to pick up 2 wide receivers? I like Adonai Mitchell out of Texas and Keon Coleman from Florida State. I know it's unlikely both are available, but I have seen a few mock drafts where they both could possibly be picked. I have also seen a few mock drafts where the Carolina Panthers have selected AD Mitchell. I've seen mock drafts for Keon Coleman does not go in the first round, and he's there at 33 and at 39. Only time will tell what happens with this wide receiver class. The great debate with the wide receiver class right now is who is the number 4 receiver. We know Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top guy. Then behind him, it's either Malik Neighbors or it's Rome Odunze out of Washington. Then behind those guys, who is it? Is it AD Mitchell? Is it Xavier Worthy, who set the combine record for the 40 time? Is it potentially Troy Franklin out of Oregon? Is it Keon Coleman? We'll see who it ends up being, but there's a big debate over who those receivers are going to be. And there's also some talk there may be a run on receivers in the first round, which would not bode well for the Carolina Panthers at 33 and at 39 if that's a position that they are targeting, but there are going to be still good players at the receiver position available because this is a deep draft class. And really, for the years to come, you're going to continue to see deep draft classes because of the way football has gone, with the forward pass being the main way to win games nowadays. As far as should the Panthers take a receiver at 33 and at 39, I think at one of the positions there, they should take a receiver. Looking at things right now, it is Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen and a bunch of guys I do not trust. And Bryce Young needs someone who can be here long term. The Carolina Panthers still don't have a wide receiver one. There's a guy in T. Higgins the Panthers could still try to trade for, where T. Higgins get drafted a couple years ago out of Cincinnati, 33rd overall. So the Panthers could feasibly find their own T. Higgins for a cheaper price, not giving up draft picks, not having to give him a $100 million contract. They could just go out there, draft someone in the second round at 33 or at 39, where they took Jonathan Mingo a year ago out of Ole Miss. For me, I think 33 should be where they target a receiver. 39, I don't think they need to double dip after bringing in Deontay Johnson. It's still only a 1-year commitment here in Carolina. It's possible the Panthers look at extending him, so it's more of a 2-year commitment, and they can get out of it after that year if it doesn't work out. Or maybe they just wait and see if he truly is a fit here in Carolina past this season. I'm not quite sure what Dan wants to do there as far as that contract goes for the Carolina Panthers and what Dave Canales also wants to have. But they went out there and helped Bryce Young by getting a proven receiver. He's been a Pro Bowler and can create separation, something that is sorely needed here in Carolina. At 33, I still feel like they need a wide receiver. Now at 39, that's where you start talking about finding an edge rusher. That's where you start talking about finding a corner, two positions that I really don't feel like have been fulfilled so far during free agency. Even if they do bring in Jadeveon Clowney, he's not a long-term solution. You look at a guy like DJ Wonnum, it could be a 1-year deal for him as he's only on a 2-year deal in Carolina. He may be, and my hope is, going to be 27 this year, that he is somebody that can be here for the next 3-4 years plus in Carolina as a starting edge rusher on this team. It's still just a position. There's a lot of questions about what the future of that spot looks like. And the best way for the Carolina Panthers moving forward is to build via the draft. Now, starting off again here with another question from Chris, what position do you believe will be used at 33? I just said wide receiver. He says, I haven't been hearing wide receiver all along, and now because Brian Burns is gone, they want to go edge. I'm not sure that's a good idea because it sounds like we may take a less talented guy just to fill the hole that a great wide receiver would take. No guarantee that at 33 it will be a great wide receiver the Carolina Panthers take. That certainly is the hope of what happens for the Carolina Panthers if they go out there and they take a wide receiver at 33. But if the Panthers decide that, okay, actually we want to take an edge rusher there, they may be reaching potentially. I was looking at Pro Football Focus and their big board. They don't have a single edge who's sitting there at 33. They have a lot of guys who are right at the late 30s, early 40s. Chop Robinson out of Penn State's becoming a popular name. Darius Robinson out of Mizzou, really impressed at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. He may be someone who sneaks in late first round, or it could be right there at the beginning of the second round. Adisa Isaac also out of Penn State. He's someone that's garnered a lot of interest. I would think those three guys would be the top options for the Panthers. And quite honestly, whether it's at 33 or at 39, and say the top receivers they had on their board. And best player available is really where the Panthers should be going when they get to the draft, considering that this is still a team that is largely devoid of high-end talent. They should be going best player available. If on their board, their top receiver that they wanted is below any of these edge rushers, they should go edge. Really, they should go best player available. But as far as I'm saying right now is, if A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman, those guys were ahead of Chop Robinson or Darius Robinson or Adisa Isaac, and they're off the board, then the Panthers should absolutely take an edge rusher and then wait to 39, where maybe a guy like Ladd McConkey is next up, or maybe another receiver behind him is someone that they like to take at 39. I just feel like right now at 33 and at 39, the top priorities for the Carolina Panthers need to be going out there and bringing another wide receiver and bringing in an edge rusher. And I will certainly listen to you if you have an argument for bringing in a corner, because that is a massive need for the Carolina Panthers. With J.C. Horn entering to the final year of his rookie deal, potentially could have the fifth-year option exercise. They brought in Dane Jackson, brought back Troy Hill. There just is not a sure bet there opposite of JC, and even at JC's spot for the Panthers long-term at the cornerback position here in Carolina. So that's where I stand right here, March 22nd, heading into next month and the real draft season here in the NFL calendar year. All right, let's take a pause here, come back. We'll look at the wide receiver position and figure out who could have a breakout year for the Panthers in 2024. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers Weekly Friday Mailbag. Either at me or DM me to get your questions in for next week's edition of the show. Over to Rod, who lives in Jacksonville, Florida, asking, who do you see making the biggest improvement this season? Terrace Marshall in a contract year or Jonathan Mingo in his sophomore season with the current veterans in the wide receiver room, new coaching staff, and improved O-line? More time for Bryce. I can see one of them having a big year at wide receiver 3. Let's start off with Terrace Marshall when answering this question, Rod. I'm honestly surprised he's still on the roster right now. There must be something that Dave Canales, Dan Morgan, and the rest of the offensive coaching staff have seen in him on tape to make them believe that he's someone worth keeping around. I believe it was 7 of the last 8 games of the season in 2023. He was a healthy scratch. Then when he got the opportunity after Jonathan Mingo was placed on season-ending IR with a foot injury in Week 18 against the Bucs, he lined up incorrectly, bringing back a touchdown for the Carolina Panthers. That's exactly what happened in that game, right? So I'm out on Marshall. I really am. I wanted to work with Terrace. I thought when they drafted him, okay, this is a guy who's coming from LSU, who played with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And you go back to that 2019 season before he picked up the injury bug, he was actually their leader in touchdown receptions that season. And he looked as dynamic as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. As we know, those two have gone on to become arguably the best 2 wide receivers in the NFL. That's even an argument. It certainly is an argument. People are arguing about everything in sports nowadays. It can never just be, oh, you're right, that guy's really good. It has to be whether he's the GOAT or not. I don't know. Don't really care. But Jefferson and Chase are both outstanding players in Cincinnati and in Minnesota, respectively. And I wish that was one of those guys would have been the wide receiver out of LSU the Carolina Panthers would have drafted a couple years ago. But instead, they have Terrace Marshall, and things have not worked out for him outside of the final 11 games of the 2022 season when he was a number 2 and they went to more of a ground and pound running style with Steve Wilkes as the interim head coach, DJ Moore doing his thing at wide receiver 1, and Terrace Marshall showing glimpses of what he could be. And the coaching staff last year came in, Frank Reich, the rest of them, and they evaluated the current roster, and they felt like the best thing for them to do was to draft a receiver in the second round. And that receiver was Jonathan Mingo. And quite honestly, he was not all that impressive at all. Looking at what he did compared to what Marshall had at least accomplished a year prior, I didn't really understand why they didn't give Terrace an opportunity. There was one game where Terrace just happened to not be active early on in the season. And Frank's like, yeah, that's kind of on me. He should have been out there in the game that day. And those are some of the things that you should have known right then and there. This coaching staff has no idea what they're doing, is completely forgetting about a player and what role he's supposed to fill when a guy like Mingo, who was out, I believe, with concussion, didn't play that game. Why Terrace Marshall wasn't getting an opportunity. Just wild stuff. So unfortunate year 3 for Terrace Marshall. I would have figured that by this point in time, the Panthers would have just cut him to earn back some cap space. Not like it was going to be a ton of money, but really to move on and start to refresh this wide receiver room. Instead, he's still here. TBD on whether he's going to be here for the long haul in 2024. As far as Jonathan Mingo, if you listen to the show on a regular basis or watch the show on YouTube on a regular basis, you know I'm not a huge Jonathan Mingo fan, and it may not make a lot of sense if him sitting here saying I didn't know who the guy was coming out of college. So because I didn't know who he was, I wasn't really like understanding why the Panthers took him. Y'all, I watch a lot of college football, and for a receiver to be taken in the second round and for me to have never heard of this guy, I'm only one person. I don't watch every single game, but that's rare. Like Jaden Reed knew who he was. Some of the other guys, I can't remember off the top. Someone asked me about this a couple weeks ago about Mingo's draft class and some of the guys that the Panthers didn't take instead of taking Jonathan Mingo. I had heard of all of those guys, and they were productive players in college. Mingo wasn't even the leading receiver on his team. It does not mean that you have to be, but he was never a 1,000-yard receiver, and he wasn't all that healthy during his time at Ole Miss. And sure, he has the 6'2" frame. He's 215. He looks the part, but the Panthers so often have seemed to just get guys who look the part, but can they actually play the game? And that's a part of the combine in the draft process where I just don't care. All right, they ran the 3-cone drill. They did the shuttle. They did all that kind of stuff. Who cares? I honestly applaud Marvin Harrison Jr. and Caleb Williams and a lot of these top prospects. Now they have the leverage where they can do this, where they don't have to take part in all this nonsense where they just like turn on the tape. You can tell I'm the best guy in this class, but they're right. Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going to sit here and waste his time preparing for the combine and training for non-football activities. He's going to train to play football because that's what he does. And yes, he has all the traits. He also has a Biletnikoff Award to show for it and also has an outstanding Rose Bowl performance. He has all these things to show I'm that guy. Mingo, all he has is just measurables. And we didn't see it. Dan Morgan, he came out earlier this offseason in defense of him saying he's got all the traits, which, yeah, we know, and that he's going to continue to grow and build and be someone who can really help them in the end. The hope is Brad Idzik, who was the wide receiver coach last year in Tampa, has that background dating back to his time in Seattle. Same with Nathan Carroll coming over, that with a more wide receiver-centric offensive coaching staff, that players like Mingo can take a leap in year two. To answer your question, which I've taken a long time to do, Rod, I would guess it would be Mingo who would be the one who takes the leap because I just don't know what Terrace Marshall's role is going to be. Maybe he gets a clean slate here in Carolina with this new coaching staff. Maybe he's still on his way out. We'll see. He needs to be healthy because him not being healthy has been a big reason why he's really slowed in his development in the league and has not been able to produce when given the opportunity or really been given opportunities in the past. With Mingo, I think he's just going to be the one right now, just based off of the words from the general manager here in Carolina and just where he was taken last year, different front office, sort of. Dan's still here. Cole's still here. Adrian's still, a lot of guys are still here. I'm just thinking he's going to get more of the opportunity and he would be the one to take the next step. So you're right to bring up the new coaching staff and then me pointing out their background working with receivers and the improvement on the offensive line, which will in turn allow Bryce Young to have more time to get the ball to his receivers. Those receivers, though, Mingo, Marshall, whoever it be, outside of course, Thielen and Deontay Johnson, have to get open in order to help Bryce Young and for them to make plays upcoming here in 2024. So great question from you, Rod. Let's take another pause. I'll come back and answer one more question here on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. And this year, honestly, no bracket pool for me. Don't need it now with FanDuel here legally in North Carolina. Why waste my time putting $20 on a bracket pool when I could put $20 down on UConn to go to the Sweet 16 or to put $20 down on North Carolina to beat Michigan State on Saturday? That's way more fun to me than filling out a bracket. No, I still would like to see how things happen for fun because this is my favorite time of the year. But whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers, that could be you, get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Bet on UConn, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets, y'all. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. UConn. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down. One final question here on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast of yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, next week, be back once again, like I will all off season long. There will be the occasional days where I don't do a mailbag because there's things like the draft going on, or maybe some other things happen breaking news wise, where the more important thing will be to discuss that. But other than that, I'll be here every single Friday talking about the Panthers, of course, and answering your questions. So either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me for next week's edition of the show. Over now to Jake, who asked, what will Carolina have to give up to move into the first round? I have a feeling they will have to get the receiver they want, despite the class being deep. Let's take a quick look at the Panthers' current draft haul here in 2024. They have their own second-round pick, number 33 overall. New York's, the Giants' second-round pick, number 39 overall. Their own third-round pick, number 65 overall. Their own fourth rounder, number 101 overall. New York's fifth rounder, number 141 overall. Tennessee's fifth rounder, number 142 overall. And Pittsburgh's seventh rounder, number 240 overall. Oh, man. I guess they would have to give up 33 at the very least, considering that is the first pick of the second round and effectively a first rounder without having the luxury of the fifth-year option. And we see so often the fifth-year option really isn't that big of a deal. There are plenty of players who get drafted in the first round, and then in 3 years' time, their team looks at them and says, nah, we're good here. Justin Fields, his team, the Bears, traded him away. Do you think the Steelers can pick that fifth-year option up? Maybe they do, but I'm thinking to say, nah, we're good here. The Jags just traded for Mac Jones, who the Patriots didn't want anymore. Do you think the Jags are going to pick up that fifth-year option? Probably not. Plenty of examples every single year of former first-rounders who do not have their fifth-year options exercised. So while it may be something that allows a team to negotiate with a player, give him more time, like a Derek Brown, to keep him around in Carolina, it's also something that oftentimes does not even get used, and it may not be that big of a discussion point when it comes to whether a team needs to have a first-round pick or if they're cool to be there at 33. If the team is not keen to even use it in the first place, they can look at 33 as, oh, it's perfect first-round pick, basically, and we don't have to worry about potentially doling out that kind of money. We can figure out things down the road. And by year 3, with these kind of players, you should really already know, or at least get a good understanding if they're going to be any good or not. And if they are, just go ahead and extend them and don't even mess around. That's what a team could do. And that's what the Panthers could do if they do keep that 33rd pick. I would think they have to give that up. They may even have to give up pick number 39 if they want to ensure they get into the first round. Likely the equivalent of a first rounder, which I believe would be like a second and a third. So 39 and 65 would be great. I still think a team, if they're going to trade out of the first round to do the Panthers a solid, they're going to say we need pick 33. But if they could give up 39 and 65 and get up in there, that would be great. Of course, they could always trade Derek Brown and get a first round pick. It would have been nice to have traded Brian Burns and gotten a first round pick. I don't think that's going to be something the Panthers are going to be looking into. They're going to say that they're going to keep their options open, that they will look at anything potentially about doing. They're not going to do it. I don't see that happening. I think they're going to stay there right where they are. They were able to add another pick into the top 40 there, that 39 overall into New York from the New York Giants in that Burns trade. They didn't lose a draft pick when they traded that 6th rounder and Dante to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson and a 7th rounder. They've already been able to add to their draft haul and not even lose it and add a top kind of tier receiver at the same time. I think if anything, they would probably trade back. Like 39, I could see them trading back to get more picks, to get more players, is what the Panthers need to do. I would love to see them be able to stay there at 33 and at 39 and to get a receiver, maybe 2, to get a corner, to get an edge rusher, and have those guys instantly come in and be starters. But the team needs more bites at the apple. We're basically back where they were in 2021, which is a sad thing to say, where this team going into the draft needs more draft picks, needs to have more cost-controlled contracts of younger players who can come in and play a role, hopefully be a starter, and then be here for the future, as this is a rebuild. I don't think they're going to move into the first round. If they do, I think it's going to cost them a second and a third, and maybe even 2 seconds in order to do that. Jake, that's just one man's opinion as far as that goes, but I wouldn't bet on the Panthers wanting to do it. Don't think that's available on FanDuel. If it is, I would say no. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, like I just did today, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me for next week's edition of the Weekly Friday Mailbag. And in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. And as always, right here on my shirt, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Monday.